Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be exploring,
Originals.
originals,
Yeah.
and we're going to be taking a deep dive into Adam Grant's book, Originals: How Nonconformists Move the World.
A great book.
Yeah, so we're going to be kind of looking at that and exploring the idea of how people champion original ideas and also challenge the status quo. What do you think are some of the biggest surprises from the book?
Oh, wow. There are so many. I think the biggest surprise for me was that the first mover advantage is largely a myth,
Yeah.
and that procrastination can actually be a really valuable tool in certain circumstances for fueling creativity.
Oh, wow.
So those were kind of mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like, being the first to market, right? Like that's got to be the key.
Right. That's what we always hear.
Yeah, to success.
Yeah.
But I think in this deep dive, we're going to find out it's a lot more nuanced than that.
It really is.
So hopefully you'll walk away from this with some new insights into how to recognize and champion originality, both in yourself and in the people around you.
That's the goal.
So let's just jump right in. I think one of the most kind of like counterintuitive ideas in the book is this notion that being first to market isn't all it's cracked up to be.
Right.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's this pervasive belief in business, but really throughout society, that the first mover advantage is the key. The first person to market with a new product or service, or the first person with a new idea.
Right, like they're going to dominate.
Yeah,
They're going to be the...
they're going to corner the market.
Yeah.
But Grant actually presents research that challenges this pretty significantly. He shows that pioneers, the first movers, often have lower survival rates
Wow.
and lower profits than those who enter the market a little bit later.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought about it that way. But now that you say it, it does kind of make sense because you're kind of like the guinea pig.
You are.
Like you're the one going out there
Yeah.
and like making all the mistakes and figuring it out.
And you have to educate the market. Right.
You have to educate people about why this thing they never knew they needed is actually something they need.
And you have to explain it over and over again.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
And often at a higher price point.
Right. Yeah. And then someone else can come along and be like, oh, well, we learned from their mistakes.
Exactly.
Like we can do it better and cheaper.
Exactly.
So I guess like one example of that comes to mind is like the Segway.
A perfect example.
Yeah.
The Segway was initially hailed as this revolutionary invention.
I remember that. I was like, whoa.
It was going to change everything.
Yeah, like, oh.
All of transportation was going to be revolutionized by the Segway.
Oh, the hype. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it didn't really pan out that way.
Absolutely not. It completely flopped.
Yeah. So what happened there?
Well, it was expensive and it wasn't entirely clear what problems it solved.
Yeah.
And it just kind of fizzled.
I guess you could also say, like, Palm Pilots were kind of like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
An early iteration.
Like the first.
Like the first mover.
But then the iPhone came along.
Yeah. And then smartphones, like,
right.
blew everything out of the water.
Yeah. And Grant argues that these settlers, these people that come a little bit later, they benefit from those mistakes and can adapt to the changing needs of consumers more effectively.
Yeah. So I guess that's like Warby Parker.
Oh, yeah.
With glasses online.
Perfect example.
Like, people tried to sell glasses online before.
They did.
It didn't work, but then Warby Parker came along and they
nailed it.
They nailed it. Like, why do you think that is?
Well, I think they focused on affordability and convenience.
Yeah.
They made the whole experience really seamless and customer-friendly.
Yeah. They really tapped into what people actually wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about being first. It was about meeting a need in the market effectively.
So timing is everything.
Timing is key.
And I think that kind of leads us into another really interesting idea from the book, which is this notion that procrastination isn't always the enemy.
It's so counterintuitive.
I know. I've been fighting my procrastination my whole life. And now you're telling me,
well, it's not always bad.
Okay.
It can be a really powerful tool for boosting creativity when used strategically.
There's strategic procrastination.
Strategic procrastination.
I like that. Okay. How does that work?
So, when you procrastinate, you're not just sitting there doing nothing.
Well,
your mind is still at work.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Even if you're not consciously focusing on that problem or that task, your subconscious is still working on it.
So you're kind of like marinating the idea, like letting it simmer.
Yeah, it's called incubation.
Oh.
Your subconscious mind is exploring different possibilities and making connections.
Yeah, I've noticed that sometimes when I just like step away from a problem for a while and come back to it, I'm like,
Oh.
You have a fresh perspective?
Yeah.
It's like you've slept on it?
Yeah, and Grant actually cites research showing that students who procrastinate on a task by playing Minesweeper or Solitaire or video games
Right.
actually come up with more original and creative solutions
Oh,
than those who just immediately started working.
that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like that gives me permission to
Well,
procrastinate a little bit.
it's not about just being lazy.
Right.
It's about giving your mind the space it needs
Yeah.
to make those connections.
Like the downtime is important.
Downtime is essential.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he talks about how Leonardo da Vinci's process for creating The Last Supper was very much like that.
Yeah, it was a long process, wasn't it?
A very long process. It wasn't this, flash of inspiration and then it's done.
Right.
It was this constant refining and experimenting and iterating.
Yeah. So I guess it's like you can't rush originality.
You can't rush originality.
It takes time. But even if we accept that and we're like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to give myself time to be original and I'm going to be okay with procrastinating a little bit to let things simmer. How do we actually know when we have a good idea?
Yeah, that's $1 million question.
Yeah, how do you know if it's actually original and worth pursuing?
Right. Even with an abundance of ideas, picking the right ones is crucial and it's incredibly difficult.
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of times I'm like, oh, this is brilliant.
Oh, yeah, we all do that.
And then it's like, oh, no, this is terrible.
Nobody else thinks so.
Yeah.
And Grant highlights the problem of confirmation bias.
Yeah, confirmation bias, big problem.
Big problem. It's our tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs.
Right, so we're looking for things that already, prove our point.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we overestimate the value of our own ideas.
Yeah, because they fit in with what we already believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And underestimate the potential of ideas that challenge our perspective.
Right, because we're like, no, that doesn't fit with my worldview.
That can't be right.
Yeah.
So we dismiss it.
So how do we overcome that?
Yeah, and he even says that Beethoven had a hard time predicting which of his compositions would become classics.
Really?
Yeah.
Even Beethoven?
Even Beethoven.
Wow.
Yeah. So, if he can struggle with that, I think it's safe to say that all of us can.
Yeah, so I guess, how do we get better at recognizing original ideas then? If it's so hard?
Right.
If Beethoven couldn't even do it?
Right. Well, Grant actually suggests that one way to overcome confirmation bias is to think more like creators when we're evaluating new ideas.
Think like creators.
Think like creators.
Okay.
And he did these experiments where he asked people to generate their own product ideas
Oh, interesting.
and then evaluate other people's ideas.
Oh, okay.
And it turns out that thinking like a creator first actually made them better at spotting good ideas from others.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So it's like by engaging in that creative process ourselves,
Yeah.
we kind of prime our brains for originality.
So it's like you're putting yourself in the mindset of the person who came up with the idea.
Exactly.
And so you're more able to see it
Yeah.
from their perspective.
And appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess
Yeah.
this kind of explains why the show Seinfeld ever got made.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Because I remember hearing that the initial pilot episode was really poorly received.
By test audiences? Yeah.
Yeah, they were just like, what is
But
this?
they didn't get it.
Yeah, Seinfeld's kind of like you either love it or you hate it.
Yeah.
But there's this one guy at NBC, Rick Ludwin, who's a comedy writer himself.
Right.
And he was like, no, this is brilliant.
This is gold.
And he championed the show,
He did.
despite all the negative feedback.
He was thinking like a creator.
Yeah.
So he saw the potential
That's so cool.
when others couldn't.
Yeah, so it's like he didn't let those traditional metrics of success blind him
Yeah.
to what was actually a really original and groundbreaking show.
He got it.
Yeah. So I guess it's not just about being the first or even knowing all the things.
Right.
Sometimes it's about having that intuition and being able to see the potential.
And being willing to champion something that others might not get.
Yeah, that takes courage.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we've talked about how the first mover myth can stifle originality and how confirmation bias can also hold us back.
Right.
But what about when we're up against people in positions of power?
Right.
How do we speak truth to power effectively when we're the ones with the less conventional ideas?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
That's such a great question. And it's something that Grant explores really deeply in the book.
Yeah.
And he emphasizes that it's not just about having a great idea. It's about understanding power dynamics
Oh.
and framing your idea in a way that resonates with those who have the power to make it happen.
Yeah.
So it's not enough to just have a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
You have to be strategic.
So you're saying you need to be politically savvy, too?
You need to be politically savvy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And he uses the example of Carmen Medina, who worked for the CIA
Okay.
and had this radical idea to make more of their intelligence accessible to analysts.
Oh, wow.
And this was back in the 90s,
Oh.
before information sharing was like
Yeah.
a thing.
Everything's so open now.
Right.
But back then it was like very...
It was all need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's going against the grain.
She was totally going against the grain and
Wow.
met a lot of resistance.
I bet.
Yeah.
Because people felt like they were losing power.
Information is power.
Yeah.
And so if you share information, you're losing power.
Yeah.
So she's challenging the core of how the CIA operated.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy thing to do.
No, and especially in a place like the CIA where it's like all about secrecy and
Exactly.
hierarchy and stuff.
Yeah. So she faced a lot of resistance, particularly from people higher up in the organization.
Yeah. But ultimately she was successful, right?
Ultimately, she succeeded. But what's really interesting is Grant highlights how she strategically gained status within the organization and learned to frame her proposal within the existing security framework.
Oh.
So she didn't come in and say, you guys are doing everything wrong.
Right.
We need to throw out the baby with the bathwater and start over.
Right.
She said, okay, here's how we can improve upon the existing system.
So she met them where they were.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she gained credibility.
And she made it more palatable
More palatable.
to the people in power.
Right.
So it's like timing and framing
Priming and framing.
were key
Good key.
to her success.
Yeah, and I think it's just a brilliant example of how challenging the status quo requires not just a good idea, but a deep understanding of the context
Yeah.
and the ability to navigate those complex power dynamics.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it requires incredible courage to speak truth to power.
Yes, it does.
And Grant tells the story of Deb Dubinsky,
Yeah.
who dared to challenge Steve Jobs at Apple.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Wow. Like in his face?
Yeah. She saw a flaw in one of his ideas for a new product
Okay.
and didn't hesitate to speak up, even though Jobs was known for his,
His strong personality.
very strong personality.
And not being receptive.
Aversion to dissent.
Aversion to dissent. Yeah.
Yeah, so what happened to her?
Well, instead of firing her,
Oh.
he actually ended up promoting her.
Wow.
Yeah. He recognized and respected her willingness to stand up for what she believed in.
So he was like, oh, you've got guts.
Yeah.
I like you.
I'm going to promote you.
Wow. That's so counterintuitive.
Yeah. It's
But also amazing.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess speaking truth to power, even to someone as
Formidable.
formidable as Steve Jobs, can pay off.
It can.
Yeah. But it's risky.
It is risky.
Yeah. But we've talked about, speaking truth to power
Right.
and how to do that effectively. But I'm curious about how do we create cultures?
That actually encourage originality in the first place.
Right.
Like, what are the ingredients of a culture that really fosters that kind of thinking?
Well, Grant explores a lot of different examples in the book.
Yeah.
But one of the most compelling is the culture at Bridgewater Associates, which is the hedge fund founded by Ray Dalio.
Okay. I've heard of them.
Yeah, and Dalio has built his company on this philosophy of radical transparency.
Radical transparency.
Radical transparency.
What does that even mean?
So imagine a workplace where every meeting is recorded
Oh, wow.
and employees are encouraged to critique each other.
Even the boss?
Even the boss.
Wow.
Yeah. There's no sugarcoating. There's no tiptoeing around sensitive issues.
That sounds terrifying.
It can be intense.
Yeah.
But it really forces people to be honest and direct.
And it prevents groupthink.
And it prevents groupthink.
Yeah, because everyone's afraid to say what they really think.
Right.
Yeah.
And he also believes that conflict, when handled constructively, is essential for growth and innovation.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So he even has this exercise called Kill the Company.
Kill the company.
Kill the Company, where employees are challenged to identify the company's weaknesses
Oh, wow.
and brainstorm ways to prevent its downfall.
So it's like pre-mortem.
It's a pre-mortem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, let's imagine the worst case scenario.
Yes.
And how to avoid it.
Exactly.
That's intense.
That's a very intense culture.
But I can see how it would foster a lot of original thinking.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it creates this culture of psychological safety
Yeah.
where people feel comfortable
Yeah.
voicing those dissenting opinions,
Right.
even if they're unpopular.
Because they know it's okay to be wrong.
It's okay to be wrong.
Yeah.
You're not going to get punished for it.
You're not going to get fired.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's this environment where originality can really thrive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I think a lot of workplaces struggle with that
Yeah.
because it's easy to say, oh, we want to hear different perspectives. But it's much harder to actually create an environment where people feel safe
To speak up.
to speak up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Grant delves into the difference between advocacy and inquiry.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Arguing that a culture of inquiry is essential for fostering originality.
What's the difference between advocacy and inquiry?
So advocacy is about pushing for your own ideas.
Okay.
And inquiry is about asking questions and seeking to understand
Okay.
different perspectives.
So it's like less about being right
Less about being right,
and more
and
about
more about understanding.
exploring different possibilities.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
And one tactic that Grant suggests is banning certain words during brainstorming sessions.
Banning words.
Banning
Hey,
words
boy.
like love and hate.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because those words tend to shut down discussion.
Yeah.
They're very personal, preference-based.
Yeah.
They're judgment words.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And they make people hesitant to share their ideas because they don't want to be judged.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's about creating a more neutral space
Yes.
where ideas can just like be explored
On their own merits.
on their merits.
Yeah.
Without all that personal baggage.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So it's like being aware of the language we use
Exactly.
and how that can impact
To totally shape the conversation.
the flow of ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about banning words. It's about actively encouraging people to ask questions,
Yeah.
to challenge assumptions,
Yeah.
to play devil's advocate,
Just to get comfortable with that discomfort.
get comfortable with the discomfort of disagreeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the growth happens.
That's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these principles of originality, like, they don't just apply to the workplace, right?
No.
Like, Grant also talks about how they apply to our personal lives,
to our personal lives, absolutely.
especially like how we raise our kids,
Yeah. So how do we raise kids who are like comfortable being original and challenging the status quo?
It's a great question.
Like, are originals born or are they made?
Right.
Like, what's the deal?
Nature versus nurture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does he say?
He says it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
He delves into research on birth order.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Which suggests that middle children statistically are more likely to be original.
Really? I'm a middle child.
Are you?
Yeah.
There you go.
So why is that?
Well, think about it. Firstborn children often get more attention. They tend to be more conforming to parental expectations.
Right, because they want to please their parents.
They want to please their parents.
They want to be the good kid.
Be the good kid, yeah.
And then the youngest child.
The youngest child often gets away with more because parents are a little tired at that point.
Yeah, you're more relaxed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They get more freedom to bend the rules.
Yeah.
But the middle children, they have to find their own niche.
Right.
They have to be more creative to stand out.
They have to fight for attention.
They have to fight for attention.
Yeah.
They're more likely to challenge the status quo because they've had to negotiate their position within the family dynamic.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating theory.
And it kind of makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about parenting styles?
Yeah.
Like, are there certain things that parents can do to encourage originality in their kids?
Well, Grant highlights a few interesting studies that suggest that parents who give their kids more freedom and autonomy
Okay.
tend to raise more original children.
So like a more hands-off approach.
I wouldn't say totally hands-off,
Right.
but it's about striking a balance
Right.
between setting clear expectations and boundaries
All right.
and giving kids the space
Yeah.
to explore their own interests and ideas.
So it's about fostering that sense of independence.
Independence.
Yeah.
Self-reliance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also like giving them guidance.
Giving them guidance, but not being overly controlling.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a tough balance.
It's a tough balance.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Grant also talks about how important it is to explain to kids the consequences of their actions,
Oh, yeah.
especially how their behavior affects others.
So not just like letting them do whatever they want,
Right.
but like helping them understand the impact.
The impact of their choices.
Yes.
Yeah. And he emphasizes the importance of emphasizing values over rules.
Values over rules.
Values over rules. So rules are about setting rigid boundaries,
Okay.
but values are about instilling guiding principles.
So like why we do things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about helping kids develop their own internal compass.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Encouraging them to think critically about why certain things are right or wrong,
Yeah.
why certain behaviors are acceptable or unacceptable.
So it's about teaching them to think for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not just about like blind obedience.
Right,
It's
yeah.
about understanding
Understanding the why.
the why.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is so insightful.
Yeah?
I'm starting to see how all of these ideas, like about risk and timing and
Yeah.
managing emotions and
Yeah.
building these cultures of inquiry and even parenting,
It's all connected.
they're all connected.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's really fascinating.
And it all points to this idea that originality isn't just about having brilliant ideas.
Yeah?
It's about the courage to challenge the status quo,
Mm.
to embrace uncertainty,
Yeah.
to learn from mistakes,
Yeah.
and to create environments where different perspectives can flourish.
Right.
It's about being comfortable, being different.
Yeah. And I think that leads us to like one of the most powerful messages in the book,
Yeah.
which is that originals are often driven by this deep sense of purpose
Purpose.
and values.
Wow.
Like it's not just about rebelling
Right.
for the sake of it.
It's not about being a contrarian.
Yeah.
It's about making a positive impact.
Yeah, like they see something that's wrong
Right.
and they're like, we need to fix this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Grant highlights the research of psychologist Shalom Schwartz,
Okay.
who studied the values that drive people's actions.
Okay.
And he found that people who prioritize values like self-direction,
Oh, okay.
stimulation,
Okay.
and universalism.
Are more likely to challenge the status quo.
So, like, what is universalism?
It's this concern for the well-being of others,
Okay.
for humanity as a whole.
So it's like having a broader perspective.
A broader perspective.
Not just like what's in it for me,
exactly.
but like what's good for everyone.
What's good for all of us.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that.
So it's about having a sense of purpose,
Yeah.
a desire for growth,
Yeah.
and a concern for the well-being of others.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are the values that fuel original action.
And it doesn't have to be like this big, grand gesture.
Right.
It can be just like everyday acts of courage.
The little things.
Yeah.
The choices we make to speak up,
Yeah.
to do things differently,
Yeah.
to stand up for what we believe in.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about that story Grant tells about the psychologist who organized a New Year's Eve party for activists in Serbia.
Oh, yeah.
Boris Kardik.
Boris Tardigrip.
Yeah. And instead of like throwing a celebratory bash,
Right?
he created this really somber event.
Yeah.
He played depressing music and delivered this powerful message about the oppression and war
Right.
that had marked the previous year.
Yeah.
Like, that's a very unconventional way
It's a very unconventional way.
to ring in the new year.
Yeah.
Like, why do you think he did that?
Well, I think he wanted to create a sense of urgency
Oh.
and to remind those activists
Yeah.
of the work that still needed to be done.
Yeah.
And sometimes discomfort can be a more powerful motivator
Yeah.
than celebration.
That's interesting because you think about, like, New Year's Eve. It's all about, like,
Celebration.
yeah. But he's like, no,
Let's get real.
let's get real.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess sometimes we need to feel that sense of dissatisfaction.
Dissatisfaction
Yeah.
with the status quo.
You'd be motivated to change it.
To be motivated to change it.
Yeah, and that kind of ties back to what we were talking about earlier with
Yeah.
loss aversion.
Loss aversion.
Yeah.
Where people are more motivated to avoid losses
Than they are to achieve gains.
than they are to achieve gains.
Yeah.
So if you can frame an issue in terms of what we stand to lose,
Yeah.
if we don't act,
Yeah.
it can be a very powerful motivator.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess like Grant's really challenging a lot of conventional wisdom about what it takes to be original and successful.
Absolutely.
Like he's saying it's not just about being the smartest person in the room
Yeah.
or having the flashiest ideas.
Yeah.
It's about being courageous,
Courageous,
compassionate,
compassionate,
and persistent.
and persistent. Yeah. And he emphasizes the importance of resilience, being able to bounce back from setbacks.
Right, because you're going to face a lot of setbacks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're going to challenge the status quo,
If you're going to put yourself out
you're
there,
going to get knocked down. You're going to get knocked down.
and you got to get back up.
You got to get back up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of like the ways that we can manage those fears and doubts?
Yeah.
Like, because it's scary.
It is scary to put yourself out there, to
Mhm.
risk rejection, to
Yeah.
go against the grain.
Yeah.
And Grant offers some really practical advice for how to manage those fears.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One of the things he suggests is to picture yourself as the enemy.
Picture yourself as the enemy.
Picture yourself as the enemy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How does that help?
Well, it's about anticipating potential challenges.
Oh, okay.
By thinking about how your idea could be destroyed, you become more aware of its weaknesses,
Oh, okay.
and you're more motivated to strengthen it.
So it's like you're playing devil's advocate
Exactly.
with your own idea. With your own idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
To make it better.
To make it bulletproof.
I like that. Okay, so picture yourself as the enemy.
Yeah.
What else?
Another tip he offers is to highlight the reasons not to support your idea.
Wait, why would I do that?
It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But it's about overcoming confirmation bias
Oh, okay.
and demonstrating intellectual humility.
Okay.
So by acknowledging the weaknesses up front,
Yeah.
you force people to confront their own assumptions
Okay.
and to consider the idea more objectively.
So you're kind of like disarming them
Exactly.
by being like, okay, here are all the reasons why this might not work.
Right.
But here's why I think it's worth considering anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like preempting the criticism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if people have to work harder to come up with reasons to reject your idea,
Yeah.
they're more likely to see its merits.
That's a really good point.
Yeah. It's about challenging conventional thinking.
Yeah.
Even our own thinking.
And ultimately, it's about recognizing that originality is a journey, not a destination.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's a process.
It's a process.
Of continual growth and learning and adaptation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that all of us can embark on.
Yeah. So I guess, like, what does this all mean for us, like, for listeners?
Yeah.
Like, what's the takeaway message here?
I think Grant's book offers this really powerful reminder that each of us has the potential to be original.
Yeah.
It's not about being a genius or a visionary.
Yeah.
It's about having the courage to challenge the status quo,
Yeah.
to question assumptions,
Yeah.
to speak truth to power,
Yeah.
and to pursue our ideas with passion and persistence.
I love that.
Yeah.
So what resonated with you the most from all of this?
Oh, wow. So much resonated with me.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm really going to take away is this idea of embracing thoughtful disagreement
Yeah.
and creating spaces where it's safe to challenge each other's ideas, where conflict is seen as an opportunity for growth rather than something to be avoided.
I love that.
Yeah.
Like surrounding yourself with people who are going to push you to think differently.
Absolutely.
Even if it means getting a little uncomfortable.
That's where the growth happens.
Yeah. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
This has been such a mind-expanding deep dive.
It really has.
I feel like I have a whole new perspective
Yeah.
on originality and
Yeah.
what it takes to make a real impact.
Yeah. It's been such a pleasure unpacking these ideas with you.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Absolutely.
And to our listeners, if you're intrigued by these ideas and want to learn more, we highly recommend checking out Adam Grant's book, Originals.
It's a great book.
Yeah, it's packed with fascinating research and inspiring stories.
And it will really challenge your assumptions.
And ignite your own original spark.
Absolutely.
And here's a final provocative thought to leave you with.
Okay.
The book explores how children's stories, emphasizing original achievement, correlate with increased innovation decades later.
Wow, that's interesting.
So what stories do you consume?
Yeah.
And how might they be shaping your own view of originality?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so let us know.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Keep diving deep.
Keep diving deep. Yeah, it really makes you think about, like, what stories am I consuming?
Right.
And, like, are they pushing me to be more original or,
Are they holding you back?
yeah, are they making me more conformist?
Yeah, it's a good question to ask ourselves.
Yeah. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, like, the emotional side of originality.
Yeah.
Because, like, putting yourself out there,
Yeah.
challenging the status quo,
Yeah.
risking rejection,
It's not easy.
it's not easy. It's scary.
Yeah, it takes courage.
Yeah.
Resilience.
Yeah.
A willingness to embrace discomfort.
So how does Grant address that?
Yeah.
Like, how do we manage
The emotional challenges, yeah.
the emotional challenges?
So he acknowledges that originals often experience a lot of inner turmoil. You know, self-doubt, fear.
Like imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome, absolutely.
Yeah.
But he offers some practical advice for how to navigate those emotional hurdles.
Okay, I'm all ears.
One of the things he recommends is something called deep acting.
Deep acting.
Deep acting.
Okay.
And this involves genuinely embodying the emotions you want to express.
Okay.
So instead of just faking it,
Right.
you actually try to tap into those emotions authentically.
So it's like more about shifting your mindset
Shifting your mindset, exactly.
than like putting on a mask.
Then putting on a mask.
Yeah.
And he talks about the work of Srdja Popovic,
Okay.
who trains activists in nonviolent resistance.
Okay.
And Popovic uses these role-playing exercises
Oh, interesting.
to help activists anticipate how others might react to their actions.
Okay.
And to practice responding effectively.
So it's like mental preparation.
Mental preparation,
Yeah.
emotional regulation,
Yeah.
getting ready for that pushback that
Yeah.
you're inevitably going to face.
Yeah, because if you're doing something truly original,
Right.
people are going to resist.
There's going to be resistance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Grant also emphasizes the importance of turning anxiety into positive emotions.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Like interest and enthusiasm?
So it's like reframing that anxiety
Reframing it.
instead of being afraid of it.
Exactly.
We're like, oh, this is exciting.
This is exciting.
Yeah.
I'm on to something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. But what about dealing with like the negative emotions?
Yeah.
Like anger.
Anger.
Because like when you come up against resistance and you feel like you're being unjustly criticized,
Right.
it's natural to feel frustrated.
Absolutely.
So how do we manage those feelings constructively?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Grant cautions against venting anger.
Really?
Yeah.
I always thought it was better to let it all out.
It seems intuitive,
Yeah.
but the research actually suggests that venting anger can backfire.
Oh, wow. So it's not like a pressure valve.
No, it can actually make you feel more aggressive.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
So he cites this study where participants were given negative feedback on an essay they wrote.
Okay.
And some were told to vent their anger by hitting a punching bag.
Okay. Classic venting technique.
Right.
Yeah.
While others were just distracted or left to sit quietly.
Yeah.
And afterwards, all the participants were given the opportunity to blast their critic with loud noise.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So what do you think happened?
I'm guessing the people who hit the punching bag
You guessed it.
were more aggressive.
They were the most aggressive.
Yeah.
They blasted the critic with louder and longer bursts of noise.
So it's like it amplified their anger
It amplified their anger.
instead of releasing it.
Exactly.
Wow, that's so counterintuitive,
It is.
but also really interesting.
Yeah.
So if we shouldn't vent our anger, then what should we do?
Well, Grant suggests that we channel those feelings into positive action.
Oh.
So it's about using that energy to fuel your mission,
Yeah.
to refine your ideas,
Yeah.
to overcome obstacles.
So it's like turning that negative
You
energy
need it into fuel.
into fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, and it's about remembering that setbacks and criticisms are inevitable.
Yeah.
They're part of the journey.
If you're not failing, you're not trying.
Exactly. The key is to learn from those experiences,
Yeah.
adapt your approach,
Yeah.
and keep moving forward.
This has been such an enlightening conversation.
It really has.
We've covered so much.
I have.
Like from the misconceptions about originality
Yeah.
to like the power of procrastination.
Strategic procrastination.
Strategic procrastination, the importance of creating cultures of inquiry,
Yes.
and even like the role of storytelling and emotional regulation.
It's all connected.
It's all connected.
Yeah.
Originality is a pretty complex thing.
It's multifaceted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think like Grant's book does a really good job
It does.
of breaking it down, of making it accessible.
Yeah, and giving us like practical strategies.
Tools and strategies. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's like the one key takeaway
Yeah.
that you hope our listeners will walk away with?
I think the most important message is that originality is not some innate talent
Right.
that only a select few possess.
Yeah.
It's a skill that can be developed,
Yeah.
a mindset that can be cultivated.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a journey that each of us can embark on,
Yeah.
regardless of our background or expertise.
That's so inspiring.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to our listeners,
Yeah.
if you're feeling inspired
Yes.
to embrace your own originality,
Please do.
check out Originals.
It's a great book.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
It'll challenge your assumptions,
It will.
ignite your creativity,
And empower you to make a difference.
and remember that final thought we left you with.
Yeah.
The stories we consume shape our view of what's possible.
Choose them wisely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So choose your stories wisely.
And let them inspire you to challenge conventions.
Yeah.
Embrace your unique perspective.
Yes.
And create a world where originality thrives.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive
It's been a pleasure.
into the world of originals.
Absolutely.
Until next time,
Keep exploring.
keep exploring,
Keep questioning.
keep questioning,
Keep creating.
and keep creating.